The blue light of our digital screens does not fade. When the sun goes down, it lingers in the modern twilight, casting a cold, restless glow over our faces and our minds. We sit in high-rise apartments, in quiet suburban rooms, or in the cramped interiors of late-night trains. But wherever we are physically, our attention is somewhere else, somewhere ahead, somewhere far down a timeline that never seems to arrive. We listen to the low hum of cooling fans from our devices, a mechanical drone that has replaced the sound of evening crickets or the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind. In this quiet, artificial space, there is a strange phantom countdown ticking beneath our skin. We look at our calendars, we scroll through our notifications, and we track our metrics, all while feeling a subtle, pervasive frictional sense that time is a predator hunting us down, and that we must run faster, produce more, and achieve absolute security before the clock runs out. We have become a civilization of runners, moving at a frantic pace, not because we love the destination, but because we are utterly terrified of what will happen if we stop. If we close our eyes and pay attention to the immediate physical reality of this moment, we can feel the exact tax this lifestyle demands from our bodies. There is a specific somatic architecture to our collective panic. We carry the passage of time like a physical burden. Notice the way your shoulder blades pull slightly inward, as if bracing against an invisible strike from behind. Notice the shallow, rapid quality of your breath, trapped entirely within the upper chambers of your chest, never quite dropping down to nourish the lower abdomen. We lock our jaws when we think about the next decade, the next year, or even the next deadline. There is a chronic, low-grade tightness in the muscles of our lower back and lumbar region, the very center of our physical grounding and survival. When we pause, even for a few seconds between tasks, a wave of internal vertigo or a sensation of falling washes over us, forcing us to immediately reach for a phone, a project, or a distraction to restore the illusion of control. We are holding our breath, waiting for a future moment when we can finally afford to exhale. We look into our mirrors every morning, tracking the subtle, irreversible alterations in our skin, the faint lines around our eyes, the shifting texture of our hair. To the modern mind, these are not signs of a natural living process. They are defects, failures, and terrifying reminders of our impending obsolescence. We treat our lives as a resource to be aggressively harvested, rather than a sacred space to be inhabited. We hoard achievements, credentials, assets, and experiences, piling them up like sandcastles built on the edge of an incoming tide, believing that if the pile grows high enough, the ocean will somehow spare us. We have built an entire existence around the myth of the permanent self, a rigid, isolated identity that must be defended against the natural flow of the universe. We think of ourselves as solid entities moving through time, rather than realizing that time is moving through us, that we are the changing current itself. This frantic running turns our minds into a ghost ship, drifting across a shoreless, nameless ocean. The ship is magnificent, engineered with the highest precision, filled with the cargo of our ambitions and the trophies of our labor. Yet there is no one at the helm. The vessel is propelled entirely by the cold, invisible winds of unrecognized fear. It moves from one empty horizon to another, never dropping anchor, because to anchor means to confront the vast, silent depth beneath the hull. We fear that if we stop moving, if we let the ship come to a complete standstill, we will be swallowed by the dark water of our own insignificance and mortality. We confuse momentum with survival, and so the ship sails on, its crew exhausted, its hull straining, searching for a permanent harbor that does not exist in a world made of fluid change. We see this same pattern play out in the collective rhythm of our society. We look at our peers and see the same driven, haunted expression in their eyes. We have normalized a state of perpetual emergency. We tell ourselves that this anxiety is the price of success, that without this sharp, biting fear of falling behind, we would lose our edge and dissolve into failure. But we rarely stop to examine the deep psychological exhaustion that underpins this belief. We are trapped in a self-perpetuating loop. The faster we run, the more alienated we feel. From the present moment, the more alienated we feel. The more desperate we become to secure our future, and the more desperate we become, the faster we run. We have forgotten how to simply sit still upon the earth, how to feel the solid support of the ground beneath our bodies, and how to trust that our value as living beings is not dependent on our ability to outrun the calendar. Let us step back from the edge of this frantic timeline for just a moment. Let us sit together in the quiet space that opens up when we refuse to match the speed of the world around us. We are not separate from the nature that changes so beautifully outside our windows. The autumn leaves do not panic as they lose their grip on the branch and drift toward the soil. The river does not fight the gravity that pulls it toward the sea. The stars do not rush through their life cycles to prove their worth to the cosmos. Only we, with our highly complex, anxious human minds, have turned the natural law of transformation into an existential tragedy. We have created a prison out of hours, minutes, and seconds, and we have locked ourselves inside, throwing away the key in our desperate pursuit of an unchanging safety. To begin the process of breaking these bars, we must first learn the art of total, unblinking awareness. We must look directly at the fear we have been running from, not with judgment or self-criticism, but with the gentle, penetrating clarity of a physician examining a wound. We must allow the ghost ship of our lives to slow down, to feel the long, slow swells of the ocean beneath us, and to realize that the water we fear is not our enemy, is the very substance of our life. As we sit here together, breathing into the tight spaces of our lower backs, relaxing the grip of our jaws, and letting our breath sink deep into our bellies, we are beginning to dismantle the invisible ledger of our anxiety. We are choosing to step out of the illusion of the future and into the heavy, grounded reality of the only moment that has ever truly existed. Right here, right now, in the absolute center of our being. To look directly into this modern condition, we must examine the living, breathing architecture of those who embody it most fiercely. Let us consider the person we have all been, or known, the architect of a highly successful life. A diligent curator of status, wealth, and continuous forward momentum. We can see them in our minds because we see them in our mirrors. An individual who has spent decades building an impeccable fortress of achievements, ticking every institutional box, optimizing every single hour, and securing every possible hedge against financial or social failure. On paper, this life is a masterpiece of modern design. Yet, if we pull back the velvet curtain of public presentation and step inside the private sanctuary of their internal world, we discover a silent, devastating structural collapse. The fortress is occupied not by a victorious master, but by a ghost ship drifting across a dark, unmapped sea, propelled entirely by the cold wind of a subterranean terror. This terror is not born from failure, but from the sudden, unbidden realization that despite every accolade, the biological clock is ticking, youth is evaporating, and the horizon of mortality is drawing steadily closer with every click of the calendar. When this awareness strikes, it does not arrive as an abstract philosophical thought. It lands immediately and aggressively in the physical tissue of the body. If we observe the somatic geography of this chronic time anxiety, we find a body that has forgotten how to rest upon the earth. Let us track the tension as it moves from the periphery to the deep center of our physical framework. The most profound site of this structural panic resides in the lower back. Within the lumbar spine and the deep psoas muscles, the ancient bioenergetic seat of human survival, grounding and instinctive fight-or-flight responses. In a person running from time, this lower back complex is frozen into a state of permanent bracing, as if the skeleton itself is attempting to lean forward into the next hour to escape a blow from the past. The muscles are knotted, rigid, and starved of circulation, creating a chronic dull ache that serves as a physical manifestation of the need to outrun decay. Moving upward, this structural constriction clamps down upon the respiratory diaphragm. The breath is the literal bridge between the mind and the world. Yet, under the reign of time panic, the diaphragm behaves like a locked gate. The breath becomes shallow, rapid, and tightly confined to the upper collarbones and the high throat. We can feel this right now if we check our own bodies. A subtle, persistent tightness in the chest, an inability to let the inhalation drop deeply into the pelvic floor, and an exhalation that is cut short, hurried along to make room for the next gasp of oxygen. This shallow thoracic breathing sends a continuous, cascading chemical signal to the nervous system that a crisis is underway, ensuring that the heart rate remains elevated and the mind stays hypervigilant. This somatic pattern climbs higher still, locking the jaw and tightening the masseter muscles until teeth are ground down in sleep and the face is set in a grim, defensive mask. There is a persistent, electric buzzing sensation localized just behind the ISA feeling of cognitive friction, as if the brain cells are overheating from the sheer volume of logistical calculations required to keep the future secure. When this person attempts to lie down in the dark at the end of a highly productive day, hoping for the restorative peace of sleep, they are confronted instead with a sudden, terrifying sense of internal vertigo. The moment the external distractions cease, the mind experiences a sensation of falling through space, a psychological drowning. The silence feels hostile because it strips away the noise that previously drowned out the ticking of the clock. To avoid this drowning, the individual instinctively reaches back for the lifeline of work, scrolling through emails, planning the next financial quarter, or tracking their biological age on an optimization app, desperately trying to construct a digital raft to float above the abyss. This frantic behavioral pattern is what we must recognize as the psychological mirror of our somatic distress. We have become obsessive curators of our own immortality projects. We treat our bodies not as sacred vehicles of experiencing life, but as biological machines that must be biohacked, measured, and aggressively preserved against the natural law of entropy. We spend fortunes on anti-aging regimens, longevity protocols, and aesthetic adjustments, not out of a deep love for health, but out of a fierce, unacknowledged hatred and fear of the organic truth of our existence. We collect investments, real estate, and digital legacies, operating under the deeply buried psychological delusion that if our social footprint is large enough and permanent enough, the natural laws of decay will somehow overlook us. We treat every single day as a line item in a corporate ledger, a resource to be mined for maximum efficiency, rather than a space to be lived. If an hour passes wherein we have not produced a measurable result, solved a problem, or secured an asset, a wave of acute guilt washes over us. We feel as though we have committed an unforgivable sin against our own survival. The profound tragedy of this existence is that the very tools we use to protect ourselves from the fear of aging and death are the tools that strip our present life of all vitality. By living exclusively in the psychological projection of the next decade, the next financial milestone, or the next health checkup, we are effectively absent from the only reality we possess. We are dead to the present moment in a desperate bid to live forever in the future. The fortress we have built to keep out the vulnerability of change becomes our prison, isolating us from the rich, unpredictable, and fluid texture of the real world. We look at our partners, our children, and our friends through the distorting lens of our personal time scarcity, viewing them either as distractions from our urgent labor or as extensions of our need to curate a perfect, permanent legacy. We have forgotten how to simply look at a tree without assessing its timber value or calculating how many years it has left. We have forgotten how to listen to a conversation without mentally drafting our next task. We are running on an endless treadmill of our own making, convinced that safety lies just a few miles ahead, oblivious to the fact that the machine is designed to ensure we never arrive anywhere at all. This state of chronic internal fragmentation creates a profound alienation that seeps into our collective cultural consciousness. We look around our offices, our cities, and our digital networks, and we see an entire species locked in the same frantic dance. We have elevated panic to a cultural virtue, labeling it ambition, drive, and high performance. We bond over our shared exhaustion, wearing our sleeplessness and our packed schedules like badges of tribal honor. But beneath the thin veneer of societal applause, we are weeping from the sheer weight of the armor we are forced to carry. The body knows the truth, even when the intellect lies to itself. The body speaks through its breakdowns, its chronic fatigue, its autoimmune distress, and its unyielding insomnia, screaming at us that the system we have designed is fundamentally incompatible with the natural rhythm of a living organism. We are trying to force a fragile, beautiful biological entity to operate with the cold, unyielding, non-stop efficiency of a silicon microchip, and we are breaking ourselves in the process. To heal this deep systemic fracture, we cannot rely on the same calculating mind that created it. We must look for a different kind of sight, a sharper diagnostic tool that can cut through the thick layers of our cultural conditioning and expose the foundational illusions that have set us running on this nameless, shoreless ocean. To dissect this profound systemic fracture, we must look beyond our modern technological quick fixes and examine the anatomical precision of an ancient psychological diagnosis. More than 2,000 years ago, an awakened teacher sat upon the bare earth and offered a radical surgical map of the human mind that cuts directly through our contemporary illusions of time panic. He observed that when an ordinary person encounters a difficult experience, a painful sensation, or an inevitable reality of nature like aging, they do not suffer merely from the event itself. Instead, they immediately project a secondary layer of mental commentary, resistance, and terror onto that event. He called this the phenomenon of the two arrows. The first arrow is the physical reality of Chang's unavoidable truth, that our bodies alter, our energy shifts, our cells decay, and our time on this planet is finite. This first arrow is a law of nature. It is neutral, objective, and inherently free of malice. However, the moment this first arrow strikes our skin, our anxious human intellect reacts by firing a second arrow into the exact same wound. This second arrow is our psychological resistance, our desperate internal screaming that this should not be happening, our frantic efforts to outrun the clock, and our deep-seated anxiety about what we might lose tomorrow. The teacher pointed out that while we may have little control over the trajectory of the first arrow, the second arrow is entirely manufactured by our own minds. We are the ones pulling the bowstring. We are the ones shooting ourselves over and over again in the dark. When we apply this ancient diagnosis to our modern battle with time, we begin to see that our exhaustion does not come from the natural passage of hours and days, but from the immense, continuous energy we expend resisting that passage. We have transformed the neutral, beautiful unfolding of impermanence into a terrifying personal enemy. Impermanence is not a flaw in the design of the universe. It is the very condition that allows life to exist at all. Without change, a seed could never break through the soil to become a tree. A child could never grow into a mature human being. A fresh morning could never give way to a star-filled night. Yet, because we are deeply attached to a rigid, unchanging concept of who we are, we treat this fluid reality as a constant threat. We look at the first grey hair or the first drop in our daily productivity as a catastrophic failure, rather than the natural, graceful shifting of a seasonal cycle. The agony we feel in our lower backs, the constriction in our diaphragms, And the electrical buzzing behind our eyes are not caused by the ticking clock. They are the somatic manifestations of the second arrow, the physical price of our refusal to let the universe be fluid. To fully dismantle this second arrow, we must go even deeper into the surgical anatomy of the mind and expose the foundational illusion that supports all our time anxiety, the myth of the permanent, separate self. We operate under the unquestioned assumption that there is a solid, isolated entity inside our bodies called the ego, an independent operator who possesses time, loses time, and must defend itself against the external world. We say phrases like, "I do not have enough time," as if time were a finite commodity, locked in a vault that someone else is stealing from us. But when we quiet our racing thoughts and look directly into our immediate physical experience, we find absolutely no evidence of a solid, unchanging self. Where is this independent manager located? Is it in the brain? Is it in the heart? When we examine our bodies closely, we find only a dynamic, ever-changing dance of blood, bone, breath, and awareness. There is no fixed observer standing outside of time, watching the world pass by. We are the passage of time. We are a living, breathing expression of the universe unfolding in this exact location. The boundary we have drawn between ourselves and the rest of existence is an arbitrary mental fiction. When we realize that we are not separate from the current of life, the entire nature of our struggle changes. You cannot be drowned by a river if you recognize that you are the water itself. This realization cuts through our modern obsession with legacy and immortality projects like an absolute, unyielding blade. We have been socialized to believe that our value as human beings is determined by our ability to etch our names permanently into the stone of history, to build businesses, accumulations, and achievements that will withstand the erosion of generations. But this is simply the ego's desperate attempt to achieve a false immortality, a refusal to accept that every compounded thing must eventually dissolve back into its original elements. The ancient teachings remind us that trying to create a permanent identity in a universe made of constant motion is like trying to draw a picture on the surface of a rushing river with a stick. The water carries the line away the very instant it is drawn. This is not a depressing or nihilistic truth. It is the most liberating realization available to the human mind. It means that the heavy weight we carry on our shoulders, the pressure to build an indestructible monument out of our lives, a completely unnecessary burden. We do not need to build a monument because we are not a separate object that needs preservation. We are a temporary, magnificent wave rising out of a vast, infinite ocean, and returning to that ocean is not a defeat, it is a homecoming. Consider the profound relief that enters the body when this illusion of separation begins to crack. When we stop shooting the second arrow of resistance, the somatic defense mechanisms we analyzed earlier have no further purpose. The lower back can finally soften because it no longer has to brace against a phantom future attack. The diaphragm can drop down into its natural, rhythmic expansion because it no longer needs to hold a high-pressure line against a perceived existential threat. The jaw can unlock because there is no longer a permanent self that needs to be defended with clenched teeth. We begin to understand that our relationship with time has been an elaborate, exhausting misunderstanding. We have treated time as a linear track where we are constantly running from a deficient past toward a perfected future, missing the entire landscape we are walking through. The ancient wisdom invites us to step off this linear track entirely and realize that the past is nothing more than a memory trace occurring in the present, and the future is nothing more than a mental projection occurring in the present. There is no other room in the entire universe. There is only this single, unrepeatable, infinite room of the current moment. By bringing our awareness fully back into this room, we begin to heal the deep psychological schizophrenia of modern life. We stop treating our hours as stepping stones to a destination that does not exist. We see that the frantic desire to optimize every minute for a future gain is a form of madness that ensures we are never actually alive when that future arrives. If we train ourselves to only value a moment for what it can give us in the next moment, we will eventually treat our final moments on this earth with the same aggressive utility, looking past our own deaths toward an abstract legacy, completely empty of presence. The surgical clarity of the teachings forces us to ask a radical question. What happens to your anxiety if you completely give up the hope of ever finding an unchanging, permanent safety? What happens if you accept, fully and without reservation, that your body will age, that your achievements will eventually be forgotten, and that the world will continue to spin without your permission? In the absolute surrender to that reality, a strange, unshakable peace emerges. It is not the peace of a dead stone, but the vibrant, open peace of an open field that does not care whether it is rain or sunshine, spring or winter. The field simply holds it all. We begin to see that our true security was never found in our ability to control the clock, but in our capacity to open our arms wide and receive the changing weather of existence without a single shield, without a single weapon, and without a single arrow left in our quiver. To emerge from this labyrinth of constant striving and existential panic, we must discover a completely different blueprint for being an architectural redesign of our daily life that does not rely on running faster or constructing stronger fortifications. We cannot merely talk about the illusion of time. We must train our muscles, our breath, and our attention to inhabit the timeless space that sits beneath our anxiety. This transformation requires a deliberate, disciplined practice that turns our daily habits into a living ashram. If we are to stop the ghost ship from drifting across its shoreless ocean, we must learn the art of dropping anchor directly into the solid, heavy substance of our immediate reality. We must transform the very biological and psychological containers that have been frozen by fear, melting them down with the steady, quiet warmth of sustained mindfulness. Let us begin this structural repatterning by addressing the primary site of our physical panic, the constricted, shallow breath that stays trapped within our upper chest. The first tool in our transformative architecture is a practice we can call the Earthgate breath. Whenever you feel the phantom countdown ticking beneath your skin, whenever the urge to check a calendar, scroll through a notification, or rush through an unstructured hour arises, you must train yourself to pause mid-motion. Sit or stand with your spine straight but not rigid, allowing the skeletal system to carry your weight, rather than relying on the tense effort of your muscles. Direct your attention away from your eyes and your forehead, and let it sink down into the lower half of your torso. As you inhale, consciously invite the breath past your throat, past your collarbones, and past your solar plexus. Imagine a gate opening at the very base of your spine, at the pelvic floor and the lumbar region. Allow the inhalation to gently expand the lower back and the deep abdomen, filling the pelvic bowl with a heavy, grounding sensation of space. When you exhale, do not rush to finish the breath. Let the air leave your body naturally, like water draining slowly from a basin, and allow the exhalation to dissolve completely into a brief moment of absolute stillness before the next wave of air begins. In this tiny, silent gap between the breath out and the breath in, there is no past to regret and no future to secure. There is only a pure, unconditioned presence. By practicing this downward belly-centric breathing for even 5 minutes a day, you send an unmistakable chemical message to your deep nervous system that you are safe, that the world is not ending, and that you have permission to exist without producing an output. You are training the body to remember that safety is not a destination you reach at the end of a career. It is a physical reality you inhabit with every deep, unrestricted breath. As the breath begins to open up the locked center of the body, we must simultaneously address the chronic internal vertigo feeling of falling through space that attacks us the moment our external distractions cease. To stabilize this sensation, we practice the discipline of sensing the bones. Our modern culture has conditioned us to live entirely on the soft, vulnerable, highly reactive surface of our existence, the changing texture of our skin, the fluctuations of our body temperature, and the restless movement of our thoughts. When we look in the mirror and fear aging, we are identifying entirely with these changing surface layers. The practice of sensing the bones is an intentional shift of consciousness into the mineral quality of our being. When you sit quietly, bring your awareness into the dense, heavy, unyielding structure of your skeleton. Feel the massive weight of your thigh bones resting against the chair or the floor. Feel the solid column of your spine supporting your head like an ancient stone pillar. Feel the heavy protective cage of your ribs and the dense density of your skull. Unlike our thoughts, our emotions, and our digital notifications, which move at a frantic, chaotic speed, our bones change at the speed of mountains and stones. They are made of the same ancient minerals that form the crust of the earth beneath us. When you anchor your awareness in the skeletal frame, you are plugging your consciousness into a vast, deep reservoir of stability. You begin to realize that beneath the fragile, aging surface of your life, there is an ancient, durable architecture that has survived countless winters. You are no longer a leaf blown about by the wind of passing hours. You are the mountain that holds the trees. This physical grounding provides the necessary foundation for our third discipline, which addresses the psychological mirror of our time anxiety. The practice of radical non-transaction. We have become behavioral transactionalists, viewing every interaction, every conversation, and every hour through the lens of what it can produce for our future security. To break this addiction, you must introduce a non-negotiable ritual of non-transaction into your weekly routine. Dedicate a specific window of time, whether it is 30 minutes a day or an entire morning, on a weekend where you are strictly forbidden from achieving anything. During this window, you do not read educational books, you do not track your steps, you do not organize your home, you do not network, and you do not optimize your health. You simply exist. You may walk through a forest without a destination. You may watch the rain fall outside your window. You may play with a dog, or you may sit in absolute silence with a cup of tea. Initially, when you begin this practice, the calculating mind will scream in agony. A wave of intense guilt and anxiety will wash over you, whispering that you are wasting your time, that your competitors are getting ahead of you, and that you are failing your potential. Do not fight this inner voice, and do not believe it either. Treat it like a barking dog outside your window. Simply sit through the discomfort, breathing deeply into your lower back, and let the wave of panic rise, peak, and dissolve on its own. By remaining still in the face of this internal pressure, you are performing a radical act of spiritual defiance. You are proving to your ego that you can survive a period of absolute uselessness. You are breaking the capitalist delusion that your worth as a human being is equivalent to your productivity. You are discovering the profound, beautiful truth that your existence is inherently valid, regardless of whether you ever check another box on your to-do list. This discipline of non-transaction naturally evolves into a continuous mental training that we must carry into our professional and social environments. The practice of the single thread. Modern high achievers pride themselves on their capacity for multitasking, the ability to answer an email while listening to a meeting, while planning a dinner menu. But this is not efficiency. It is the systematic fragmentation of human consciousness. It is the exact process that turns our minds into a frantic ghost ship. The practice of the single thread requires you to do exactly one thing at a time, with absolute, undivided devotion. When you write an email, Let the entire universe consist of nothing but that single sentence. When you speak to your child, let your eyes, your ears, and your heart be completely occupied by their voice when you eat a meal. Taste the food without reading an article or listening to a podcast. When your attention inevitably drifts toward the next task or the next hour, as it will do thousands of times, do not punish yourself. The moment you notice the drift, you have already returned to the present. Simply pick up the thread of your immediate reality and continue weaving. This relentless return to the present moment acts as a powerful solvent that dissolves the linear illusion of time. You begin to see that the future is not a real place you are traveling toward. It is an abstract fantasy that exists only as a thought in your head right now. There is no need to rush through this hour to get to the next one, because when the next hour arrives, it will simply be another version of now. By mastering the art of inhabiting the current thread, you eliminate the friction of anticipation. You stop trying to carry the weight of the entire tapestry at once, and you find that a single thread is light, manageable, and effortlessly beautiful to hold. Through these combined practices, opening of the breath, the sensing of the bones, the ritual of non-transaction, and the discipline of the single threadway, construct an unshakable inner architecture that no longer fears the passage of time. We are no longer trying to protect a fragile, isolated ego from the natural laws of aging and decay, because we have dismantled the very walls that kept us separate from the universe. We see that our anxiety was a product of our isolation, a symptom of a mind that forgot how to trust the larger current of life. As we practice these tools day after day, a deep cellular relaxation begins to take hold of our entire being. The frantic momentum of the ghost ship slows down, its sails drop, and its hull settles deeply into the water. We are no longer running from the ocean, we are learning how to float upon it, trusting that the water which carries us is the same water that sustains every living creature across the infinite reaches of time. When these modern mental disciplines and structural somatic anchorings are integrated into the fabric of our daily lives, a profound and quiet revolution takes place within the laboratory of our human existence. The frantic, unyielding momentum of the ghost ship that once defined our reality begins to stall, its massive synthetic canvas sails dropping toward the deck, allowing the vessel to settle heavily and authentically into the water beneath it. We find ourselves standing on a threshold of a completely unmapped psychological state of consciousness we can recognize as grounded timelessness. In this realized state, the ticking of the clock does not stop, the gray lines do not magically vanish from around our eyes, and the social contracts of our daily lives do not suddenly evaporate. Instead, our fundamental relationship to these phenomena is completely turned inside out. We discover the rare and unshakable baseline of a human being who has ceased to treat time as a predator. We step off the conveyor belt of perpetual optimization and plant our feet onto the solid, fertile earth of our immediate existence, feeling the immense relief of someone who has finally stopped running from their own shadow. This new state of consciousness brings with it a distinct physical and mental landscape, a spacious clarity that can be felt in the very marrow of our bones. The lower back, which once held the tight, frozen memory of an survivalistic emergency, now exhibits a supple, resilient strength rooted down into the ground like the base of an ancient oak tree. The respiratory diaphragm moves with an effortless ocean-like fluidity, expanding fully on the inhalation to fill the lower belly and dropping away into a state of profound stillness on the exhalation. There is no longer a constant, emergent salival chemical signal firing through our nervous system. The internal alarm has been permanently deactivated. The electric, high-pressure buzzing that once occupied the space behind our eyes dissolves into a cool, luminous clarity, leaving the mind feeling like a vast mountain lake on a windless morning, deep, silent, and capable of reflecting the sky without holding onto a single cloud. When we look at our schedules, our projects, or our long-term goals from this space, we no longer see them as battlefields where our existential worth must be violently defended. We see them as simple, temporary patterns appearing in the open field of our awareness, lines drawn upon the water that we can engage with joy, dedication, and precision, without ever believing they can make us more or less whole than we already are. In this space of absolute presence, we begin to clearly hear the echo of the teacher's final, urgent guidance delivered over 2 millennia ago beneath the shade of the twin trees as his own biological form prepared to dissolve back into the elements. He did not leave his followers with a set of rigid, external dogmas to protect them from the vulnerability of the world, nor did he offer them a magical sanctuary outside of nature. Instead, he looked at the weeping assembly and reminded them that every compounded thing in this universe must eventually change, decay, and pass away, and that their ultimate liberation lay in striving for their own awakening with unremitting mindfulness. He called upon them to be islands unto themselves, to be their own lamps and their own ultimate refuge, seeking no external security, but rather anchoring themselves in the unconditioned, deathless nature of awareness itself. This final message is not a somber reminder of death, it is a magnificent, triumphant declaration of the infinite potential of human consciousness. It is a reminder that we do not need to outrun the clock to find absolute safety, because the very nature of what we are, the silent, open space that holds the changing current, cannot be aged, cannot be eroded, and cannot be destroyed by the passage of time. We realize, with a deep and quiet humility, that the nameless, shoreless ocean we have been sailing across for so long was never a hostile expanse designed to drown us. The ocean was simply life itself, unfolding in its natural, magnificent, and unpredictable entirety. The frantic ghost ship we constructed out of our ambitions, our anxieties, and our immortality projects was the only thing keeping us separate from the water. By allowing that ship to slow down, by dropping our weapons, and by refusing to fire a single secondary arrow of resistance into our own hearts, we have allowed ourselves to dissolve back into the whole. We are no longer travelers trying to reach a safe shore across a dangerous sea. We are the sea itself, rising as a temporary wave, experiencing the brilliant light of the midday sun, and returning to the deep, silent belly of the ocean without fear, without regret, and without a single reservation. The ledger of our anxiety is empty, the countdown has ceased, and we are finally, completely, and unforgettably alive in the only moment we will ever possess. As the cold, artificial blue light of your devices fades into the warm, natural dark of the evening, and as the sound of these words begins to settle into the quiet corners of the room, let yourself sit in the spacious silence that remains. Feel the heavy, mineral weight of your bones resting upon the surface of this rotating earth, and notice the long, slow, effortless rise and fall of your breath as it moves through your open chest. You are here, you are breathing, and the entire universe is unfolding exactly as it should within the laboratory of your own awareness. If you truly stop trying to optimize your life for a future that does not exist, and if you completely surrender the exhausting hope of ever finding an unchanging, permanent safety in a world made of beautiful, fluid motion, what is actually left in this room that is not already completely free, completely whole, and completely timeless?